action.
I'm giving you the tools, right? I'm giving you the sandbox. I'm setting the table for you, but it's up to you to decide what you want to eat.
Master Chief is human. He's not a machine. He's not a set of armor with a big weapon. He's a human with resilience and courage.
You know, and I was so looking forward to this moment because for Master Chief, you know, the stoic soldier, the man of few words, all that. But there was this progression, you know, in terms of his emotional side, even through the first 3 games. But this was going to be the great leap.
What happens when that soldier starts to discover his humanity?
We had to create a situation that was going to knock him out of his comfort zone. The Master Chief has settled into this comfort zone of being the hero. You know, it's interesting. Early on, we talked about the hero's journey, and like, how do you have a hero's journey when he's already a hero?
What are the sacrifices that you need to make in order to preserve something as precious as humanity?
The journey is the important part. The growth is the important part. And so really, where does he still need to go as a human? That became the key to not just the story of Halo 4, but the entire trilogy.
We're really examining what sort of burdens a Guardian carries.
In a lot of ways, the story that we're telling with Halo 4 is about putting Chief in circumstances where he's forced to change. He's forced to take stock of himself.
In a way, Chief is a Guardian. Cortana is Chief's Guardian. The Forerunners were the Guardians of their own universe, and they might have to make a decision that not everyone is going to agree with and that some people might condemn.
It's almost like you're a little kid and you're just playing make-believe again. So you imagine everything. The table's here. The plinth for Cortana is here. There's a window here. Ready, go.
How can we immerse the player even more in this world that we've built around them?
I'm not doing this for mankind.
How can we have Chief have to deal with his own humanity?
Everything had to be predicated by what the character needs were and what direction the characters needed to go in.
The art direction specifically for Halo 4 isn't about creating an emotional tone for Halo 4, it's about creating an emotional tone for every single moment and experience that the player needs to understand.
Similar to what we said is that, you know, we build what we need to see. We can't look too far this way, it starts to fall apart. But back in here, things are looking good.
Film is like, I'm going to create something and it's going to be awesome and I'm going to polish it and I'm going to own it, but I'm going to share it with you, which is very different than game storytelling, which is I'm going to give you all the tools, I'm going to give you all the possibilities, and it's up to you to discover it.
Answering questions and answering the directions that the narrative had already taken defined the path forward for us as we started to tell the story.
We're always telling these huge, big stories. We've got Infinity, it's the biggest ship that has ever been launched. We've got Requiem, which is like the biggest Forerunner artifact we've ever found. But in the middle of all of that, we've got this very small personal story between Master Chief and Cortana.
You tell a story with every detail that you put into a game. Immersion is really what allows somebody to believe your universe and also to become emotionally caught up in your universe.
Ready to get back to work?
I thought you'd never ask.
How do we make sure the sights and the sounds and the things that they're feeling as a player inhabiting that suit really comes through more clearly? And you know, technology has allowed us to do that with much higher fidelity than back in the CE days.
Okay, so those are definitely bigger ones.
Yeah, those start to get...
Just because we've got more people.
Let's roll video. Yeah. So this will be just video and audio only, no face, no mocap.
In that case, you won't mind if we return the favor.
As we design these things, we put together the best plan. Until it actually touches an actor, it lacks humanity.
Having the ability to work with the actors on stage, capturing their face, body, and voice at the same time, really gives us an opportunity to create an immersive experience for the actors.
Working at Giant, we can have at least 8 actors in the same volume at the same time.
So the objects that they're acting around and the people that they're acting with, against, through, and toward are there in the scene with them, and it makes a huge difference.
We sent out a breakdown for the characters and how we wanted them to feel. We ended up getting 80 or 90 submissions back through our casting team.
Casting for the Master Chief is tough. You need a performer that has a really raw physicality to him, and yet he has to, within the confines of this suit, be able to relate and relay emotion.
I like to express myself. I freely do it. I wholly do it. I enjoy it. And so pulling back on all of those instincts is what's required to play him.
Imagine that translating to a 3D model with huge armor and making sure the personality of Chief's movement comes through that armor was really critical. And that really came down to Bruce's acting, his physical stature, and really his physicality as he went through all of the performance.
You'll never see his face or hear his voice, but all of the other actors that are playing off of him have received so much from him in their performances, and I think that they would all agree with that.
This is the low-res asset of Chief. We were afforded a little bit more budget since he's our hero.
From the art process, storytelling is just about engaging the player. You don't have to answer any questions. You don't have to take them through a lot of loops of feeling. The player's engaged. I think you've got the start.
So Master Chief's a difficult one because he's a dude in a helmet.
There's such a, particularly in science fiction, such a fantastic history of people being completely realized as people without having their face as a tool.
For us, it's making him feel like a real person. We have a nude male sculpt, and then from there we sculpt it on physically, a tech suit.
And on top of this guy is when we spend time just doing all the details and trying to add some of that functionality, even little bits here and there like Braille, and this just reads 117.
I think it's connected to having even more modern visual flow when it comes to his lines, his design, the way you follow the outline of Master Chief.
Trying to put it into an area where it feels realistic, that it feels kind of tankish.
What do you think of a tank? You think square, you think metal, there's some wear and tear on the edges. So those things we want to grab, put them on the Chief so it communicates that.
The fingers are missing here on these. They have armor caps that come on, but he doesn't have armor caps on his trigger finger or thumb finger so that he could have more tactile sense when he's shooting and loading his weaponry. The last thing we just changed was his visor. His visor picks up the elements based on the room that he's in.
We want to take every inch of the character to tell a story as much as we can.
Above all, he still needs to connect to the player and they still need to understand him as being that character. It's somebody who's been very loved over the last 10 years.
The irony here, right, is that we have a character who's not human at all in Cortana.
I was put into service 8 years ago.
She is the most human character that we have in the story. Like, she's struggling with her own mortality.
AIs deteriorate after 7, Chief.
That's something that everybody struggles with. That's the most, human it gets.
If we can just get back to Earth and find Halsey, she can fix this.
Everyone has to figure out what it means to die.
She's strong, she's convicted. She herself is going through a really difficult time in understanding the things that are happening to her.
We were looking for somebody who really could bring just fire and stuff that's required for some of those sequences.
We needed to make sure we found someone that had some innocence to her, but also could be very strong at the same time.
If you imagine that you could have 20 emotions at one time, she has that. I will not allow you to leave this planet!
She's really the heart of the game and the heart of Master Chief and explains what's going on and why it's a problem.
I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to do that.
Cortana is certainly our biggest human connection, I think, with the entire story.
How can we see these subtle details in her facial structure?
It's the Forerunner symbol for Reclaimer.
So this is the baseline where we started from Cortana, and then we go through and tweak and modify, having all these different elements moving throughout her that make her feel alive constantly. We wanted to make it to where you could have code flow lines start from every digit from her toes to her hands, and then be able to flow all the way up into her head.
What you experience is her taking care of you as a player from a gameplay perspective, but I think you also start to get a sense of how she takes care of the human side of Chief.
Wake me when you need me.
They spotted us!
Bringing Jen and Steve in and having them layer their voices over the character performances in the cinematics, that just brought the whole experience together.
You look at just the number of lines that the Chief has had over the course of the franchise, and it's not a lot.
How much firepower would you need?
And yet people will immediately call you out on the Master Chief's voice being something very distinctive and important to them.
The funny thing is that they've had this off-screen chemistry because they didn't actually meet until last year.
Not only is this the first time they've ever sat together on a panel, this is the first time they've ever been in the same room or even met.
So seeing them meet and seeing them have that chemistry in real life and seeing how they acted together in scenes just felt like we just missed this opportunity for all these years to actually get them together and get something even more memorable and more exciting out of them.
In the beginning, they were great choices for those characters. Steve has this very stoic personality that comes through in his few words. The same way Jen's voice is confident and it's strong, but it can also be playful.
You do know you don't have to wait until the last minute just to impress me, right?
In many ways, Halo 4 is the first act.
We want a player to be able to ask themselves what it is to be a hero. Is the sacrifice worth it?
I often think of him as like Atlas, you know, like he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders all the time.
Chief and Cortana are the same person, but she has always been the reflection of his humanity.
People don't play Halo to watch a soap opera, and yet you don't want to just be kind of pulp.
To me, it's a natural progression of this story, and it takes this relationship to the place it should go to.
Don't make a girl a promise you can't keep.
Putting aside our sorrow, we renewed our faith in the prophecy that other rings would be found, and see how our faith has been rewarded.
The Covenant used to be the main threat, and it was a MacGuffin in the original Halo series because the real threat was the Forerunner legacy and the Flood itself.
The Forerunners have been the source of so much mystery throughout the Halo franchise. It was something that was just fascinating to us.
So far, it's been a lot of stumbling into their belongings. You know, like we found Halos. And now we found something more. We found the Prometheans.
There's a degree of animalistic fierceness that maybe you didn't see in previous games.
The conditions and the context are what pit a hero and antagonist against each other.
For this game, we're going to get to see a lot of complexity to their civilization.
From their worldview, what they're doing has to make sense.
Trying to figure out ways to tell that story without interfering with the shooting aspect of it has been a really challenging thing.
We've gotten glimpses of this Forerunner presence that was kind of always there, open as to whether it would ever erupt. And it did.
We're trying to really take game systems and manipulate them and give them emotional coloring and context.
We wanted to create something that could stand alone and be an enemy that is just as challenging, just as engaging as the Covenant has been in the past for Halo.
A lot of that initial discussion was around if you had this incredibly evolved race and they were well beyond humanity, the Covenant, what would that look like?
The design process for the Prometheans was intriguing, exciting, and then long and painful process. I think just because everyone was so invested in what they wanted out of them.
How do you imply something strong, something vertical, something different? And how could we actually have a global logical language out of that Forerunner philosophy?
Anybody who's played Halo goes, okay, Forerunners the silvery angular stuff with blue lights across it. That's really the language kind of in a nutshell. For us, it was important to break that, but still find kind of like a mathematical organization.
We had to do a very clear separation of style, shapes, colors, right from the start.
I think the Knight's been through almost like 15 plus iterations of geometry.
This sheet is like very traditional way of doing brainstorming. You just do silhouettes and then we take it and iterate some more and more and more.
We didn't want them to look like monsters because they're not monsters.
We had a version that looked very demon-y.
These things on his back, they would go together and they would like flare out when the player was being spotted.
We didn't want the Prometheans to look like robots because they're not robots.
A version that looked very thin and spindly.
We would see one, it's like, you know, that one looks cool, but it really doesn't convey commander of the battlefield.
We had other stuff where they could clamp on and have these big, hulking, massive armors on top of them that would really change the variant look.
For us, it was important to get it into something that people could relate to, which I think is always going to be a challenge when trying to take the Foreigner language and create a character.
Making sure that his head stood out, that you could see it, that players had the ability to headshot it. It falls also onto animation. They were able to bring these guys alive and make it feel believable and plausible and still be very fast and lethal.
Locomotion didn't look heavy enough at one point, so we scrapped everything and did it all again. The Knight's like 12 feet tall, so if it doesn't feel heavy and menacing as it's walking around and doesn't intimidate the player, then we're not doing our job.
There were not a lot of real-life elements that we could take.
There are joints there, some of them are not physically connected. They're holed up with the space in between them, which is some of the features that the architecture has, which is big, massive buildings like floating, defying gravity. We wanted to keep some of that mystery and kind of the unknown in the characters as well.
We even have the little micro driver arms in here, and then all the way to where we turn these layers off. We have the glowing skull.
We thought it would be more of an impact if it's like a sarcophagus. It opens up and it's showing all this aggression.
There's certain ways to approach fighting an elite with a group of grunts, and really what we wanted to do was change that up.
The Covenant are tried and true. You know what you're going to get out of a grunt. You know what you're going to get from a jackal with his shield. The toughness of elites. Here are the brand new hooks to the sandbox.
Prometheans are made up of the Knights, the Watchers, and the Crawlers.
One of the big focuses for us in the design of the Forerunners was to have these different enemy classes that would be able to work together.
Having this dissection so that when the player went into combat, he's sort of tactically evaluating which order to take guys out.
They don't act independently of each other. You put any combination of them together, and the strategy you need to engage with them is really different.
There are a variety of Knight classes, and each one of them is progressively more powerful, but your base Knight actually starts just a little bit more powerful than an elite.
But in addition to that, we wanted the Knight to have his own set of traits and abilities.
There's all kinds of these special features of each one of these characters that players haven't played in a Halo game before.
You think about basic combat encounter design, a lot of the challenges designers face is how to introduce enemies.
What would a Promethean do if it could bend time, space, form, matter?
Knights can phase in out of anywhere.
He's able to go where he needs to at any time, which is something the Covenant can't do.
Heads up!
Crawlers can walk on walls, walk on ceilings.
If a Knight shield bursts, Crawlers will come rushing at you and try and like melee the player to get more aggressive.
These certainly slot into that grunt style combatant. And so there was certainly a want to make sure that we can get a lot of them on screen.
If you let too many of them get together, they become a really formidable force. One-off, super fun to take out all together. It's like a pack of feral dogs.
Its mandibles, when it screams, will actually separate and float around in the air while it's howling. Animation added so much fresh behavior to this character. It's very exciting.
The Watcher is definitely a support class.
One of the things we wanted to do with the Forerunner characters was constantly have them mix up their tactics and make the player react to it.
The Watcher is able to regenerate Knights.
One of the things we needed to do when the Watcher design was coming along was make sure that the Watcher would actually fit inside of the Knight. That bursts out and swap to the actual Watcher asset.
The Watchers are aware of the Knight's damage, they'll protect them, they'll catch grenades, so they kind of coordinate their efforts.
The Prometheans feel like the most advanced of the bunch. They're able to bring all of their technology and wisdom to the battlefield.
With new enemy class comes new weapon class.
We literally concepted probably 200 weapons for this game before we settled on the half a dozen that went in.
It's kind of like you've got that balance between humans' model of what a weapon's like and the desire to want to try and make something crazy and futuristic.
We tried coming up with this perfect mix of stuff that was still relatable. You would still identify a weapon as a rifle or a shotgun or a submachine gun, even though they're almost magical. The Forerunner Scattershot was probably the first one where we really nailed the design on it. Everybody loves the hinge action shotgun, so we tried doing something like that so that the reload animation would be to cock it up and the front half would smash together.
Every time you pick up a Forerunner weapon, it forms in your hand.
So that sort of kicked off the component of having these guns form around the player.
So there's that moment of like, oh, what is this gun? What does it do? And then when it comes into shape, it's kind of immediately identifiable.
What makes the Forerunner weapons distinct is that usually they have dual purpose. So for instance, from the bolt pistol, you can charge it up and have something that's equivalent to almost like a shotgun blast.
In the case of the light rifle, we actually experimented with doing dual firing modes. We tried to make it so there was the best of both worlds with a BR and a DMR.
It works like the battle rifle when you're not scoped. That has a little spread, has a 3-shot burst, and it works like the DMR when you are scoped. So it's like a mini sniper rifle in a way.
It actually changes to a different firing mode where the projectiles are stronger.
One of the big things that we really focused on for them was making sure that the weapon doesn't just feel like a chunk of metal, but that it actually has glowing energy that's flowing through the gun, going down the barrel, so that everything is very full of life. The moment where all the Promethean effects really started to click the most was when we started showing the dissolve whenever you kill a Knight. That was really when we started to feel, yes, this is something cool, this is something unique, and something that we haven't really seen before.
This is an early prototype of the Knight E-Res. As the sphere expands, you see the particles are birthed, and everything in the red region you see will be the crack and the erode.
When you shoot and kill the Knight, the actual point on the body where you did the damage is where the dissolve starts.
So if you shoot from his foot, he will de-res from the point of his foot up.
The end result, when we blow up a Knight, they dissolve, proving that the technology works.
I look at the changes that we're making, and it really feels like we're making a sequel to Halo 3. And that's exactly what we're setting out to do.
We have the Covenant from previous games. We have the UNSC. We had all these things to take from, like, all right, we can make a new take on this, but we had zero information to some of this Forerunner stuff.
We're not just on a Halo, we're on a whole planet now. We're not just threatening one corner of the galaxy, we're threatening everything.
We're listening to the fan feedback. We're incrementally evolving different aspects of the game design, but there's nothing really revolutionary. And I think that's important, because I think really good design is evolutionary, not revolutionary.
And I think at some points we got in our heads with this game that we're just going to make another Halo. I don't think that's what people want. They may think they want that, but what they really want is something that speaks to the things that they love, but then provides them with something new. How do you get people more deeply connected with your universe?
We're trying to make it innovative, we're trying to make it accessible, and by introducing story and a narrative thread through the whole Infinity multiplayer experience is something that we really wanted to put a lot of attention and detail into.
If it's a universe that everybody wants to be really excited about, it's got to grow and evolve beyond just an incredibly balanced suite of mechanics. It's got to speak to fantasy and what people want and what they expect.
Something we really wanted to do with Halo 4 was to bring a new perspective to Halo multiplayer.
Flight assassination!
The high-level philosophy for multiplayer was that we wanted to unify the competitive and cooperative experiences under this one big narrative banner that we call Infinity.
The Infinity is a UNSC ship that is home to the Spartan 4 program.
Really try to contextualize multiplayer in such a way in which it doesn't feel like abstracted game mode off to the side. It feels very much part of the same universe.
We knew we wanted to expand the audience as far as we could, but still satisfy the core as much as possible. We had to break everything down to line-by-line evaluation of our current scripts and redefine that core loop to not make it like Halo 2 or like Halo 3 or something in the middle, but make it Halo 4.
Halo starts with a philosophy that we've upheld, which is that your gameplay mechanics are consistent across every mode, so they don't change.
We want to give players the power to choose which weapons they take in. People have their own personal favorites.
It's a growth system in that you're unlocking customizations for your character, you're unlocking new weapons and abilities, but that's also helping to train you how to use those over time.
You have armor abilities and armor mods, which are sort of under the hood modifications to your armor that give you abilities, give you passive changes.
And then that completely fit in with our new scoring system.
There's a lot of actions players take in multiplayer that contribute but don't necessarily put a score on the board.
Because of the objective medals and all the extra ways you can score in a match, no players are finishing the game with a 0.
Hail Mary.
So one of the big things for us was making sure that people felt involved, felt like they could always contribute in some sort of way.
You're getting rewarded for teamwork, your style, your kills, your assists, the objectives you complete. And as you do that, you're going to get medals that fill up your ordnance meter.
Ordnance ready.
Once your ordnance meter fills up, the UNSC Infinity gives you 3 rewards you can choose from. Those are going to be power weapons, power-ups, or grenades, and you can call them down right to you.
Request confirmed.
We've added what we're calling a situational record.
That's a replay of the person that just killed you and how they killed you. It just adds a bit more information for players.
The matchmaking system has evolved to let us join in progress. Overall, this means players will be getting into games faster and more often.
So the new CTF really focuses on trying to encourage a little more team play.
In the past, there was a lot of dropping of the flag and changing of roles.
Now when you pick up the flag,
carrying flag,
you're 100% committed, and at that point, your role is now to deliver that flag.
Your HUD will change to tell you exactly where the deliver point is.
Everybody can see exactly what it is that they're supposed to do.
If you don't have that flag, then you'll still get points for helping your flag carrier, driving him around, assisting him, saving his life, returning your own flag, defending your flag against the enemies.
It's a much more intense experience for all of the players.
Enemy team scored.
Probably the biggest focal change is that we're trying to build more vehicle-friendly maps, and then to go with that we've got a new mode called Dominion.
Dominion is everything we loved about big team battle mixed with objective-based gameplay. You have lots of vehicles, big power weapons, large maps, but now there's bases.
As you reinforce the bases, then shields will come up, or you'll be able to activate turrets to kind of reinforce those locations.
It's kind of like territories, but with a little bit more of a twist.
Territory control.
One of the biggest challenges was trying to get vehicle and infantry play to work really well on a large map that had a lot of interior space.
In Longbow, for example, all the bases in Dominion are fully thought out features in the map, and that really lets you get that break-in and defend gameplay.
The idea was to try and make sure that the team started here or here. The paths that they could take in between involved great pinch points, places where the vehicles would automatically run into each other and jump over each other.
Whenever we start a space, we need to concentrate on a few key things. One is that there's distinct landmarks everywhere you look, so you can orient yourself and you never get lost while you're playing. Two is that whenever you're moving from location to location, if you're jumping across a gap, that none of those jumps feel frustrating. So for instance, floods are a replacement for infection, and players have higher jump height.
Infected.
We needed to make sure that we could make a map that you're always going to hit your target, you're always going to be able to move around smoothly.
Flood is a spiritual successor to Infection. We knew how popular this mode was, we knew it had a lot to live up to, so we didn't want it to just be a Slayer variant anymore. The ground up, it's a new script, it's its own mode now. And now when you're Flood, you get this new character model, you get a big claw, which you can completely slice the survivors in half with.
If you look at the model, there's a set of fingers gripping the top of it. The idea being it's kind of been an explosive growth. As soon as they get infected, it just kind of pops out of them. There's like little teeth inside now.
In addition to all of the new elements that we're adding to Halo 4 multiplayer, we're bringing back and improving a bunch of old favorites. We're bringing back King of the Hill and Oddball.
With Oddball, we also want to incorporate all the elements of our new scoring system. We're looking for ways to make it a team-based experience like never before. Instead of just running away and hiding, now players get points for passing, catching, intercepting the ball. It completely changed the landscape.
We're working with Certain Affinity to build content for multiplayer. It's a pretty huge undertaking.
Certain Affinity has been a great partner to 343 for many years. They worked with us on the Defined Map Pack and Halo Anniversary. For Halo 4, they helped us with a bunch of multiplayer and Forge maps.
And one of those maps will have a Griffball court in it.
Gain the lead.
Forge is our toolset that allows players to customize their own levels. So we give multiple spaces that each have unique components that you can kind of mix and match to make your own layouts.
We felt like a previous permutation of Forge wasn't necessarily the most accessible. The biggest thing for us was trying to increase the speed at which you can build things.
We have a lot of new components. First is a magnet system, which makes it easier to line up pieces to each other.
You see these little guys over here. These are hand-placed magnet points. Based on these points, you toggle it in the game and you can actually snap pieces together.
Another thing that we have is the duplicate object tool. So if someone has a crazy idea, you can just place something. Oh, I have a mongoose. I can make 6 more of those.
Whenever you exit your editing mode, you'll end up seeing shadows cast on the pieces that you placed.
I can place a block sort of anywhere I want, and they'll just sit there. There'll be no shadow on the ground. It'll look kind of like it's floating, even though it's actually quite close to the ground. But then if I turn the lighting on, boom, you instantly get a shadow there.
There's going to be things out there where we just end up scratching our heads being like, how did someone do that?
In the tradition of remaking maps, we've chosen to do Valhalla, and this time we're calling it Ragnarok. it is almost identical to the original layout of Valhalla. We fine-tuned things for jetpack and things like that. But the biggest change to this map is the addition of the Mantis.
The Mantis is probably the biggest new sandbox toy we have this time around. When you walk up to it, you'll see it sitting on the floor, and so you hop in this hatch in the back. On its right hand, it's got an enormous UNSC chain gun, and then on the left side, it's got a 5-canister rocket pod. You can use both weapons at the same time, and the rocket pod itself, you can charge up and actually fire all 5 rockets at once. The other thing that's really sweet with it is it has a melee stomp. This is probably the most powerful vehicle in a Halo game since like the Scorpion or Banshee.
We knew from the start that if we're going to put this in campaign, we have to bring a multiplayer. What better toy do I want to use the Battlefield than the mech?
When you look at Halo's audience, you've got a group of players that really gravitates towards campaign, and then another group of players that really gravitates towards multiplayer.
The idea of knitting together the narrative and this gameplay experience was the genesis of where Spartan Ops came from.
The narrative thread through Spartan Ops is absolutely huge. 6 months after the events of campaign are over, the crew of the Infinity is going down to investigate Requiem.
Some of the old hands here know what you're in for. The rest of you, you're due an education.
Each week you have a new episode of the series that's continuing to tell this evolving story. And then you have these 5 missions that tie directly to that episode.
And actually, in some cases, you have a direct impact on what's happening in the next week's episode.
Don't relax yet. You've got more hostiles headed your way.
There are both creative challenges and production challenges. One is it's just a huge amount of content.
We have, 50 missions that we're developing over the 10 weeks of the Spartan Ops season. We only have this much space, we only have this much RAM, we only have this much bandwidth. So we had to do a lot of technical trickery so that everything that we wanted to accomplish was able to happen.
We want you to feel invested as part of the story.
We wanted players to feel like they're accomplishing something.
You rise up through the ranks, and once you get up to 50, we have what are called specializations. Specializations are kind of the end game for your Spartan career. Each specialization has an armor set, a bunch of emblems, an armor skin, and probably the biggest thing is that you can also unlock an extra armor mod. You can actually have a little gameplay item. Are you a vehicle guy? Are you a sniper? Are you someone who wants to level up faster? We actually have a mod that lets you earn XP a bit faster. It's more about specializing how you play at that point rather than the core gameplay mechanics being modified.
So all the choices that you're making carries into the Spartan Ops experience.
I'm going to tune in every week. We'll experience a story together for the first time as friends, and then we'll go play together as friends. And so this sort of new version of the water cooler.
Spartan Ops will be one of those pinnacle moments for us in the franchise of creating new expectations for gamers and really delighting people with just great new functionality.
We're seeing just kind of the tip of the spear.
Going where we want to go in the next steps is only made possible by building absolute confidence.
A hero is someone who takes action even though they have something to lose.
You gotta have the gumption. You gotta have the confidence to go after it.
No matter how deeply we explore the universe or how much detail that you find out about aspects of the universe, it's still bigger and more mysterious than any amount of information could ever give us. And I think that's how the real universe is.
Super excited about where this game has evolved to.
There's so much variation at all levels of the game that make it infinitely replayable.
People play it and they say, man, that's great, I just want one more game, and another one, and just keep going.
It has been sort of this puzzle that's come together person by person.
To me, that's the most fun thing, is seeing people play it, enjoy it, and have fun. And you know it just started with that single spark, that single sentence from one designer to another.
We
wanted to have a cinematic approach to the music to give it that scale and those production values, but it's like doing 20 movies.
There's always something that is kind of moving along emotionally. It's never like treading water. It's never static. It's very different. So it requires a completely different mindset.
Take the things that we love about the Halo scores that have come before and try to put that into it, but then also add in the things that really excite us, so we create something that's really honest.
As intimidating it is to follow Marty's scores, I think I can bring something fresh to the game. I want there to be a journey, and a felt journey, an emotional journey, and I think that's the part that music plays.
He's an extremely competent and confident composer. He's got a real instinctive knack for knowing what sounds right, and he knows how to get there.
Neil's a fan of Halo, and he's making something that he's really excited about for Halo.
I know that's why Neil was attracted to do it, because they very much talked about that they wanted the integrity in the music as high as the integrity is going to be in the design of the game.
He's a big fan of the franchise, and he's played all of our games from the beginning.
I've been playing the game since 2001, and there's this mysterious guy behind the green suit of armor. Been intrigued as to what he feels.
We were fortunate enough to inherit the expectation that the score would be lyrical, that it would be emotional, that the music would matter.
He gets in here and you can't stop humming it, you can't stop thinking it.
The melding of the classical with the unexpected that Neil brings, that makes for excitement.
It has a lot of street cred within industry.
You know, with his work with Massive Attack and stuff, he was absolutely at the cutting edge of sounds and beats and electronic textures and how he manipulates sound.
He uses that sort of initial performance as a starting point.
Maybe we can record this twice as fast so that we can slow it all down and pitch it down, and it'll be live orchestra at Abbey Road, best conditions you can imagine. But we're going to subvert it a little bit. We're going to play it backwards or play it an octave down or run it through guitar amplifiers or things like that.
We needed a music composer who can bring a mixture of digital and organic.
I'm choosing the sounds very carefully, and I'm processing the sounds as I'm writing.
Listening to everything that we had as examples of what was already recorded, everything was treated differently.
It's important to go for something that's never been done.
Here's the obvious answer, okay, but there's something better we can do, something more original we can do.
We're very aware of the legacy of the Halo sound, and we're very keen to respect it.
As Halo fans, we hope that other Halo fans will say, oh man, yeah, that's cool, I like it.
It's not a revolution, it's an evolution of the past Halo scores.
Rated M for mature.